She didn't knock twice. She didn't text ahead. She just showed up at his door at 9 in the morning holding 2 bags of groceries like she'd known him for years. And that was the moment Jay Kwon realized his entire system was broken. Before we dive into this story, if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we drop stories like this every week and you do not want to miss the next one. Now, let's talk about what happens when a billionaire fakes being broke and a woman shows up at his door the next morning with groceries anyway. But let's back up, because the groceries aren't where this story starts. This story starts with a lie. Jay Kwon was 34 years old and worth more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. He ran Kwon Digital, one of Seoul's fastest-growing tech firms, had a penthouse in Gangnam with floor-to-ceiling windows, and hadn't cooked a meal for himself in over 2 years. He was sharp, controlled, and exhaustingly good-looking in the way that made people assume he had never suffered a day in his life. That assumption was wrong, but Jay had learned a long time ago that suffering was private business. What was also private business was the test. Nobody knew about the test except his best friend and company VP Minho, who had begged him to stop doing it no fewer than 6 times. The test worked like this. Whenever Jay agreed to a blind date, he showed up as Jay Kim. Not Jay Kwon. Jay Kim, a mid-level project coordinator at a small tech company who split a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate in Mapogu and drove a 2017 Hyundai. He dressed down. He picked modest restaurants. And at the end of every date, he patted his pockets and looked apologetic and suggested they split the bill. Most women split it politely and never called again. A few made excuses and let him cover it, then texted the next morning asking what he did for fun on weekends. Code, he believed. For what else do you have? One woman, 2 years ago, actually laughed in his face and said she had higher standards. He almost respected her for it. The test was born from a specific wound. Her name was Yuna, and he had been engaged to her for 7 months before he found a conversation on her phone, not a suspicious one, worse than that. It was a practical one. A conversation with her best friend where she laid out in calm, organized bullet points exactly how much she stood to gain from the marriage and what her exit timeline looked like if things went south. She wasn't cruel. She was strategic. And somehow that was so much harder to recover from than cruelty would have been. Cruelty he could have hated. Strategy just made him feel like a transaction. So Jay built the test, and for 3 years nobody passed it. Then a colleague named Park set him up with a woman he described only as an American, very direct. You'll either love her or you won't. Jay almost said no. He said yes because Minho told him he was becoming genuinely unlikable and needed to at least practice being a human being in public. Simone Carter was 31, originally from Atlanta, currently living in Seoul on what she called a permanent temporary situation. She'd come for 6 months, fell in love with the food culture, and never quite left. She ran a culinary content channel with a modest but loyal following and did consulting work for restaurants trying to build fusion menus. She was not looking for a relationship. She had, in fact, almost canceled the date twice. The only reason she went was because her mother, during their Sunday video call, looked her dead in the eye through the phone screen and said, "Baby, you are in one of the most beautiful food cities on earth. Go feed somebody and stop hiding in that apartment." Simone had laughed and said that wasn't how dating worked. Her mother said, "It is when you know how to cook." They met at a Korean barbecue place in Mapo, Jay's usual test location, deliberately mid-range, the kind of place that was good enough not to be insulting, but modest enough to communicate that Jay Kim was not a man of excess. Jay got there first. He was nursing a barley tea and preparing his face, which was something he actually had to do now, arrange himself into a softer, less CEO version of his personality. It took effort. Minho said it was sad that being a normal person required preparation. Jay ignored him. Simone walked in 7 minutes late, which she immediately acknowledged. "I'm sorry, the subway was actually, no, I just misjudged the time. I'm sorry." Jay blinked. Most people blamed the subway. She sat down, looked at the menu for approximately 45 seconds, and then looked at the raw meat on the grill between them and said, "Do you want me to handle this, or are you going to?" "I can." Your tongs placement is already wrong, she said, not unkindly. Let me. And that was how their first date began, with Simone Carter taking over the grill like she had been personally offended by the way he was about to cook the meat, and Jay Kwon sitting across from her with an expression he hadn't worn in years, which was genuine amusement. She was funny in a way that didn't perform. She asked questions that were actually curious, not interview questions dressed up as conversation. She told him about a restaurant owner she was consulting for who kept insisting that putting hot sauce on everything was the same as flavor development, and she had nearly quit twice. She asked Jay Kim what the most frustrating part of his job was, and when he gave a vague answer, she tilted her head and said, "That sounded like something you say to people you don't trust yet." He didn't have an answer for that. When the bill came, Jay did the thing, the pocket pat, the slight grimace, the should we just. Simone had already put her card down. "Don't worry about it, you can get it next time." Next time? She said it like it was already decided, like she had already made a quiet determination that he was worth a second evening. Jay sat there watching her sign the receipt and felt something strange move through his chest that he couldn't immediately name. He told himself it was nothing. He was wrong. Jay did not sleep well that night. This was unusual. He was a disciplined sleeper, 10:30 lights out, 6:30 alarm, no exceptions. Sleep was a performance metric to him, something to be optimized. But that night he lay on his back in his enormous bed in his enormous penthouse and stared at the ceiling and kept returning to the same moment. Not the conversation, not the way she laughed, not even the thing she said about trust. Just the card going down on the table, the complete absence of hesitation. Like his comfort mattered to her before she had any real reason to make it matter. He didn't know what to do with that. By 7 in the morning, he had already responded to 11 emails, reviewed a quarterly report, and told himself 3 separate times that he was not going to reach out to Simone Carter. She was interesting, yes. The date was the best one he'd had in years, yes. But interesting and good were not reasons to open a door he had spent 3 years carefully keeping shut. He knew how this went. People presented their best selves early. The strategy always revealed itself later. He just needed to be patient and let the reality catch up to the impression. By 7:45, he had talked himself completely out of contacting her. At 8:59, his doorbell rang. Jay frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. His housekeeper came Tuesdays. His assistant knew not to come to the penthouse without calling. He pulled up the door camera on his phone and stood very still for a moment because Simone Carter was standing in his lobby holding 2 paper bags and looking completely unbothered. The way people look when they are doing something they have decided is entirely reasonable. He pressed the intercom. "How do you know where I live?" "Park gave me the building," she said. "I was at the market this morning anyway. Your fridge looked sad last night." "You didn't see my fridge last night." "No, but I saw your face when I ordered the extra banchan," she said. Like a man who had forgotten that side dishes were an option. "That's a sad fridge face. Are you going to let me up?" Jay stood in his kitchen for a full 4 seconds doing something he almost never did, which was having absolutely no idea what the correct move was. Then he buzzed her in. She came through the door, set both bags on his counter, and looked around the penthouse once. Not the way people usually looked around it, which was with their mouths slightly open doing mental math. She looked around it the way you look around a place and try to understand the person who lives inside it. Her eyes moved over the clean lines, the absence of personal photographs, the single shelf of books that were all business and economics, and she nodded slowly to herself like something had been confirmed. "Nice place," she said. "Lonely but nice." "I'm not lonely," Jay said automatically. "I didn't say you were," she said. "I said the place was." She was already unpacking the bags. Perilla leaves, firm tofu, 2 trays of eggs, a bag of short-grain rice, a small container with a handwritten label that said SC Blend in black marker, her own seasoning mix, he realized. Dried anchovies, fermented soybean paste, a bunch of green onions so fresh they still had soil at the roots. "You don't have to cook for me," Jay said. "I know," Simone said. "Where are your pans?" He pointed. She found them, assessed them, and made a small sound that suggested his pan collection was acceptable, but only barely. She filled a pot with water and set it on the stove and started rinsing rice with the focused calm of someone who found deep comfort in the ritual of it. Jay stood on the other side of the kitchen island and watched her and genuinely did not know where to put himself. "You can sit down," she said without looking up. "You're hovering." He sat on one of the island stools and watched her move through his kitchen. She wasn't performing. That was the thing that kept catching him. There was no awareness of being watched, no angling, no subtle checking to see if he was impressed. She was just cooking because she had decided to cook, and that was the whole story as far as she was concerned. "Can I ask you something?" Jay said. "You're going to anyway. Why did you come?" She looked up at that, considered him for a moment with those steady, unhurried eyes. "Because I had a good time last night, and because you seem like someone who doesn't get taken care of very often, and I was curious what you'd do if somebody tried." That's a strange reason to bring someone groceries. "Is it?" She went back to the stove. "Where I'm from, when you care about someone, you feed them. It's not complicated. We had one date. And I'm not proposing," she said. "I'm making you breakfast, breathe." Jay breathed, barely. She made doenjang jjigae. He didn't tell her that was his mother's dish. He didn't tell her anything. He just watched her add the soybean paste to the pot and felt something move through him that was too large and too quiet to name properly. Something that had been sitting in storage for a long time. They ate at his kitchen island. She asked about his family. He deflected the way he always did, smooth and practiced, redirecting with a question of his own. She answered his question, then came back to hers like she hadn't forgotten it for even a second. "You don't have to answer," she said, "but I notice when people dodge." "I'm not dodging." "Jay." He looked at her. "You're very good at seeming present while being completely somewhere else," she said. "I just want you to know that I notice, that's all." His phone erupted on the counter. A work crisis, he could tell from the pattern of notifications before he even picked it up. He answered, and something shifted in him instantly, the warmth vacating his face like a light being switched off. His voice dropped an octave. His sentences became short and precise and completely without warmth. He paced while he talked, not aggressively, but with the coiled efficiency of someone accustomed to being the most consequential person in every room. He hung up after 4 minutes and turned around. Simone was leaning against the counter with her coffee cup, watching him with a calm expression that contained absolutely no judgment, and somehow that was worse. "That's the real you, isn't it?" she said, not a question. Jay opened his mouth, closed it. "You're not a broke tech worker named Jay Kim," she said quietly. "You're Jay Kwon. I Googled you after the date." The kitchen went very still. Jay had rehearsed this moment before. Not specifically, not with Simone, but in the abstract, the moment someone figured out the test and confronted him about it. He had imagined anger. He had imagined tears. He had imagined the cold, surgical withdrawal of someone who felt manipulated and wanted him to know exactly how much. He had played out a dozen versions of this scene in his head over 3 years, and in every single version, the other person fell apart first. Simone was not falling apart. She was standing in his kitchen, drinking her coffee with the same steady composure she'd had since she walked through his door, and she was watching him the way you watch someone who is about to make a decision about themselves, and you want to give them enough room to make it correctly. "How long have you known?" Jay asked. "Since about 11 last night," she said. "Your name, the company, the building, it wasn't hard. You're not exactly low profile, Jay. And you still came." "I still came. With groceries." "With groceries," she confirmed. He pulled out the stool across from her and sat down slowly, like a man reassessing the ground before putting his full weight on it. "Most people would have been angry." "Most people make other people's choices about themselves," Simone said. "You pretended to be someone else on a date. That's your thing, not mine. I wasn't going to let your trust issues determine what kind of person I showed up as." Jay was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Seoul was fully awake, the city noise drifting up even this high, distant and constant, the way the ocean sounds when you're far from shore but never quite out of earshot. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay. And then Jay Kwon, who had not voluntarily told anyone the true reason for the test in 3 years, told her about Yuna. Not the polished version he gave Minho, not the abbreviated version he told himself at 2 in the morning when the thought surfaced, the real version. The conversation he found on her phone, the bullet points, the exit timeline. The way it hadn't felt like betrayal so much as it felt like erasure, like finding out you had never been a person to someone, just a position on a balance sheet. Simone listened without interrupting. She didn't rush to fill silences. When he finished, she set her coffee down and was quiet for a moment. That's a painful thing to carry, she said finally. I'm not asking for sympathy. I know you're not, she said. That's not what I'm offering. I'm just saying it's painful and you've been carrying it like it's just information, like it didn't break something in you. Jay looked at the counter. It didn't break me. I didn't say it broke you, Simone said. I said it broke something in you. Those aren't the same thing. He had no answer for that. The precision of it sat in his chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending rings outward that he couldn't stop. The test, he said. I know it's a wall, she said simply. Dressed up as a system. I understand why you built it. I'm not going to tell you it was wrong because I don't think it's that simple, but I want you to understand something. She looked at him directly. I didn't pass your test. I didn't even take it. I just showed up as myself and your test had nothing to do with what I decided to do this morning. Then why did you come? He asked again, and this time the question had more weight in it, more rawness. He genuinely needed to understand. Simone was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer but no less certain. Because something about you last night felt real underneath all the performance. And in my experience, when you get a glimpse of something real in a person, you have 2 choices. You walk away because real is complicated, or you bring groceries. Jay looked at her for a long time. I don't know how to do this, he said. It cost him something to say it. She could see that. Do what? This, whatever this is, I don't know how to be. I've been operating a certain way for a long time and I don't know how to just. He stopped. Started again. I'm not good at being known. I noticed, she said. You're not terrible at it either. You just told me about Yuna. He almost smiled. Almost. That's a low bar. Every bar starts somewhere, she said. His phone buzzed again. Then again. The office pulling him back into orbit, the way it always did, the way he had always let it because orbit was safe and orbit had a predictable path. He looked at the phone and then looked at her, and for the first time in a very long time, he didn't immediately reach for it. He let it buzz. Simone noticed. She didn't comment on it. She just picked up her coffee again and looked out at the city through his enormous windows and said, Seoul is so loud even from up here. You get used to it, he said. I don't want to get used to it, she said. I like that it still surprises me. Something about that landed differently than she probably intended. Or maybe exactly as she intended. With Simone, Jay was finding, it was hard to tell the difference because she didn't waste words on things she didn't mean. He was still thinking about what she said when she gathered her jacket and told him she had a client meeting at noon and needed to go. He walked her to the door. They stood in the doorway with the particular awkwardness of 2 people who had covered significant emotional ground over breakfast and weren't sure what the etiquette was for the departure. Thank you, Jay said, for the food. Thank you for letting me in, she said. She meant the apartment. He knew she didn't only mean the apartment. He watched the elevator doors close and stood in his own doorway for a moment longer than necessary. Then he went back inside, back to his phone, back to his world. The pot she'd cooked in was still on the stove. The container of SC blend was still on his counter. The perilla leaves still in a glass of water because she'd told him they'd wilt otherwise and he should use them in 2 days. He picked up his phone and called Minho. I need to tell you something, Jay said. You met someone, Minho said immediately. Jay paused. How did you? Because you're calling me before 9 a.m. and your voice sounds different, Minho said. What happened? She brought me groceries, Jay said. Silence on the other end. Then, Jay, don't ruin this. Jay looked at the container of seasoning on his counter. I'm going to try not to. He tried not to for exactly 11 days. Then he ruined it anyway. It happened quietly, the way Jay ruined most things. Not with a dramatic blow, but with a slow, deliberate retreat. The kind that looks like reasonable distance until the person on the other side of it realizes the door has been locked from the inside. Over those 11 days, he and Simone had texted. Good mornings that weren't planned but started happening anyway. Voice notes she sent from markets she was visiting for work, little audio postcards of sizzling pans and vendor conversations, and her own commentary running underneath everything warm and unrehearsed. He sent back careful, measured responses. She didn't call him on it. She just kept showing up in his phone like a plant that didn't require the right conditions to grow, just consistency. They had dinner on day 5 at a place she chose, a small jjajangmyeon spot in Yeoljiro that had no business being as good as it was. She ate with complete commitment, noodles and all, and didn't pretend otherwise for his benefit. He found that almost aggressively attractive. He also found it terrifying because he could feel himself softening in ways he couldn't immediately reverse, and softening, in Jay's internal vocabulary, was a synonym for exposed. On day 8, she sent him a voice note at 11 at night. She'd had a hard client meeting. The restaurant owner who kept insisting hot sauce was a personality had finally pushed back hard enough that she'd nearly walked off the contract. Her voice in the note was tired but not broken, still carrying that particular brand of Simone resilience that frustrated him slightly because it made his own armor feel performative by comparison. He listened to the note 4 times. He typed and deleted 6 different responses. He finally sent, "That sounds exhausting. You handled it right." She sent back, "How do you know I handled it right? You don't know what I said." He sent, "Because you're still thinking about it instead of celebrating, which means you showed restraint. That's handling it right." A long pause. Then, "That might be the most unexpectedly perceptive thing you've said to me." He stared at that message for longer than he would ever admit. On day 11, his assistant forwarded him a profile piece that a business magazine was running the following month. Standard coverage, Kwon Digital's expansion, Jay's leadership philosophy, the usual architecture of his public image. Somewhere in the final edit, a researcher had pulled an old photo from a charity event 18 months prior. In the photo, Jay was standing next to a woman, Yuna. They looked like exactly what they had been: polished, compatible, constructed. Jay looked at that photo for a long time, and something old and cold moved through him like weather. That evening, he had his assistant send Simone a message from his work account. Professional tone, grateful language, the kind of message that closed a door so gently you almost didn't hear the latch click. He thanked her for the breakfast. He cited a demanding period at work. He wished her well with the consulting contract. He read it back once, told himself it was the right move, and went to bed. He did not sleep. Minho called him the next morning at 7:45, which meant someone had talked, which meant Jay's assistant had a loose professional boundary they were going to discuss. "You drafted a termination notice," Minho said, no greeting. "I sent a message." "Jay, you sent the woman who brought you groceries a work email, with your assistant's signature block." Jay said nothing. "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear what your life has become?" Minho's voice wasn't angry. It was something more uncomfortable than angry. It was disappointed in the specific way that only people who have known you a long time can manage. "She didn't take your test. She didn't try to pass it. She just showed up with food and cooked in your kitchen and told you the truth, and you responded with a formal closure email." "I'm protecting." "You're hiding," Minho said. "There is a difference, and you know there is." Jay stood at his window. Seoul spread out below him, indifferent and enormous, the city moving through its morning with no awareness of or interest in one man's fear. He pressed his forehead briefly against the cold glass. "What if it goes the same way?" he said quietly. "What if it doesn't?" Minho said. Simone was not sitting by her phone. This was important. She had decided the morning she sent that last unanswered voice note that she was not going to fold herself into the shape of someone else's unresolved pain. She had her own history, her own scar tissue, her own reasons to keep people at arm's length. She had chosen not to. That was her decision to make. What Jay chose was his. She told her best friend Kezia about it on a Thursday night call, both of them in their respective kitchens on opposite sides of the world. Kezia making jollof in Houston, Simone prepping a recipe test for her channel. "So he ghosted you with a work email," Kezia said. "His assistant's signature was on it," Simone said. A pause. Simone. "I know. You brought that man groceries." "I know, Kezi. At 9 in the morning. I am aware of what I did." "And he sent you," Kezia stopped. Okay, how do you feel?" Simone was quiet for a moment, her knife moving steadily through a bunch of green onions, the same kind she'd bought that morning at the market, the kind that still had soil at the roots. "I feel like I met somebody who doesn't know how to be met," she said finally. "And I feel like that's genuinely sad for him. And I feel like I'm not going to spend too much more time being sad about it on his behalf." "Good," Kezia said. "But I also feel," she stopped. "What?" "Like he was real," Simone said quietly. "Underneath everything, he was real, and I don't meet that very often." Kezia was quiet on the other end, the sound of her stirring the pot filling the silence between them. "Then I hope he figures it out," Kezia said finally, "before you stop caring whether he does." He showed up on a Saturday. No assistant, no prepared remarks, no strategy. Just Jay Kwon standing outside Simone Carter's apartment building in Mapogu at 10 in the morning holding a single grocery bag that, upon inspection, contained items that had no logical relationship to each other. A tin of anchovies, a box of Oreos, 2 sweet potatoes, a bottle of sesame oil, and a mango that was not yet ripe. Simone opened the door, looked at him, looked at the bag, looked back at him. "Anchovies and Oreos," she said. "I panicked," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that he felt the full weight of what he'd done with the email, what he'd done with the distance, what it had cost her to show up the way she had and receive what she received in return. He didn't try to talk through it. He just stood there and let her look. "You hurt my feelings," she said, straight and simple, no performance around it. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I got scared and I defaulted to the only thing I know how to do when I get scared, which is create distance with both hands and call it sensible." That's a very self-aware apology. Minho helped me workshop it. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile yet, but the territory just before one. "Come in," she said. "But I'm not cooking this," she added, peering into the bag again. "This is not a meal. This is a panic attack in a grocery bag." "I know," he said. "Teach me." She looked at him at that, really looked at him. At the man standing in her doorway without his armor, without his system, without his assistant or his penthouse or his careful performance of distance. Just Jay, uncertain and present and trying. "Okay," she said quietly. "Come in." And that was how it started. Not with a grand declaration, not with a perfect moment. With a bad grocery run and an honest apology and 2 people standing in a small, warm kitchen in Seoul, one of them learning to cook and the other learning, slowly, imperfectly, for the first time in a very long time, how to let someone stay. He burned the first thing she taught him. She made him do it again. He burned it slightly less the second time. She told him that was progress. He said that was a low bar. She said every bar starts somewhere, and he remembered that she had said that before, on a different morning, in a different kitchen, and he understood now that she had meant it then the same way she meant it now, not as consolation but as truth. Outside, Seoul was loud and relentless and completely indifferent. Inside, something quiet was beginning. If this story moved you, hit the like button and let us know in the comments, would you have brought the groceries? Subscribe so you never miss a story, and we'll see you in the next one.